Good evening to all of you. It is indeed very nice to be part of such a great panel here. And I know it is fag end of the day. You have been here since morning. Some of you must be really looking forward to going to your homes, catching up with other things in life. But I do hope, keeping you the great panel we have, we are going to have something very, very meaningful today. And as we all know that in whole of the school ecosystem, the main focus is always the students because what we create of them and whether they become a responsible citizen or they create a big difference in the world or what kind of outcome they achieve in their life, whether it is a social outcome or they go for a lot of monetary outcomes and so on, it all depends at what kind of nurturing and support we do while they are studying with us. I remember one of my um, earlier colleague, Stephen Rawlinson. He was sharing with me the other day. There are so many great things in life which we take it for granted. When he used to wake up in the morning, he used to say, "Wow, great, Pankaj, I'm alive today." Somebody who saw him in that mood for the first time, he said, "Oh, what happened to him?" But he was so excited. You see, it is such a great joy to be alive and here right now. In the same way, he used to say, "Wow, what is the most important thing in our life? Our children." And if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, yes, I'm giving my son, my daughter to you, will you take care of him or her?" So they are giving their most precious asset to you. And it is really a joy and a privilege to really nurture them well. So I believe that kind of real nurturing can only happen when we have a lot of love in our own self. Because whatever we have, only that thing we can give to others. So that is the reason in the earlier panel, Sister was very rightly mentioning that the role of self-awareness in creating great leaders is very, very critical. Now, we talk about how to nurture achievers and create dreamers. It does not mean that we shall be leaving behind a lot of other people who are not that much achievers. Because for a teacher, everyone is an achiever, everyone is a dreamer. We know about the famous experiment where the teacher, Pygmalion's effect and all, we all know about that. There's sometimes the teacher's own expectations set that how my student will do. Like somebody said, "Can you really say that what is going to happen in life?" We'll say, "I don't know. The world is so uncertain." But then somebody asked that person, "Can you say that your child will die out of hunger?" Then that person said, "No, no, no, no. How it is possible? I will make sure he or she will not die out of hunger. I will make sure." But whether that kind of commitment, that kind of passion do we have for our children, for our students? So we'll be talking about achievers and dreamers. And based on my previous experience as a VC, as a group CEO in India and abroad, I have also been leading these kind of initiatives. In one of the organizations, we created a scheme known as a Super 20 scheme. That institution was uh, a very big institution. They were having about 1,500 students, and they were getting an average package of around 8 to 9 lakh, or even lesser, and they were not able to attract so many students. So the idea was that in business school, people look at the ROI. They look at how much money I'm going to get. So we created a scheme by which we did some psychometric testing. We created an internal competition, and we found out the super 20 people who are having a lot of passion to do something great. And then we nurtured them, and their average salary went almost like 14 lakhs. And it is not about the only salary outcome, but also somebody wanted to open their own company. Somebody wanted to be a singer. Somebody said, "I want to assist Amir Khan." Now that person is assisting Amir Khan. In the, that Amir Khan always comes with, very, very innovative way of marketing his films. So what I say that when you are having that opportunity, then what you do with that opportunity, that is what make a big difference. So like that student who is now assisting Amir Khan, when I was director of our institution, he came to me and he said, I think, Professor, I made some wrong decision. I came here, I don't want to do MBA. So I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to do singing. I'm more interested in film. So I told that you have got to such a big brand. Now, can you do it together? So, then we created a model for him. And I knew Anuradha Podwalji and I connected him to her. And while he was doing his MBA, he was also able to come out with his 3 albums. And based on that work, it led to his placement in Z Music. And from there, he went to a production house. And from production house to another production house. And now he is with his dream job of with Amir Khan. So in the same way, we can always create those kind of outcome for our students. I remember one student wanted to go to work in McKinsey. He had that dream, and that was it was not a top 20 business school. And we know that McKinsey comes only the top 10, top 5 institution. So then again, one professor who told me about this, and we created a small mentoring group for him. And we said, okay, see, which institution McKinsey goes and what they are looking at. So we found out that McKinsey always prefers people with a research bent of mind. So we were in Ghaziabad at that time, and it was economic downturn was there. So we said, let us do some research. So we contacted the Ghaziabad Management Association, and they said, we would like to know what are the causes of sickness and how to do turnaround. So they gave us a research study which he conducted, and then he came out with his book, Rehabilitation of Sikh Industries, a case study of Delhi NCR. And then he very proudly sent that book to all the top 6 firms, including KPMG, McKinsey, Ernst & Young, with a note, I am so-and-so, I have written this book, and I'm taking liberty to, share my book with you. And by the way, I'm also interested in exploring opportunity with your company. And when he got all the 6 interview calls, and he converted McKinsey. So many times you need to believe in the dream of your students, and then only they can become great achievers. But at the same time, what sister was mentioning, everyone is already an inborn achiever. Some of them are only struggling that I am not good enough, but they are already good enough. They are already having the seed of divinity within them. So the role of a teacher has to remove that fear, remove that darkness, and to bring the best out of the children. So these are my initial opening remarks, and now we'll be listening from our very valuable panel members. So I'd like to invite, firstly, Joy. Would you like to share? Thank you.
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. And there are plenty of people out here, Gideon, Maria, all of them who can speak about education, about nurturing dreams from their own perspective as educators, as people who are helping people get to their dreams. I can only speak from a much more personal angle. And it's a funny one, but as I said, the things, whatever I did, the things that got me to where I was simply love and passion. And I say that with, it's not just love for my work or love for something. It was actually, when I was in college and I was doing my graduation, it was in mathematics. And in those days, I did mathematics because I didn't get into engineering, and mathematics seemed like the only other, stay in science so you can get a quasi-engineering job or get an MBA after that. And when I was in my 3rd year of college, I fell in love with this girl who was a year junior to me, who was also doing mathematics. So it seemed a good idea at the time. After that, when I finished, she joined, she applied, and in that year, for a year, I was doing a MSc while I still decided whether I wanted to go abroad or not to do mathematics. I wasn't very sure of what I did. But she applied for and got something called computer science, a job, Master of Computer Applications, which is an entrance exam which you sit for and get. And then I said that if she's studying that, the odds of my staying with her would increase if I managed to get into the same course. So while she applied, I also applied, and we both made it there. So it got me into computer science, which, as you know, you can make out already my career decisions were very well thought out. At that point in time, what happened was that we kept doing that. Now, my hobby at that time was quizzing, and I was tremendously into quizzing. But what was a safe job? And my parents were actually relieved that at least for better or for worse, this lady has managed to coerce me into doing computer science, which is a very respectable profession. And after that, I actually got a very respectable job as well, which was fantastic. I got a job with a company called Patni, which is where all the, the guys have started off. Patni is where, and even Narayan Murthy started off at Patni, and it seemed a great job. And my parents heaved a sigh of relief and said, finally, we don't have to worry about him, because by middle class parents, kid gets a job in computer science, they're. Now I had one other problem. I was still in love. And when you're in love, what I figured out was that what she was doing, how much she enjoyed computer science, I couldn't enjoy computer science that much. And it really bothered me, because she'd sit and she'd be talking to her and she'd be wondering about this problem she wanted to solve, or something in her head about a problem. And I said, hold on, I don't feel this way about what I'm doing. I'm really good because I'm a smart kid. I'm good at what I'm doing, but I really don't like it the way she does. So wait a minute. I have two choices. Either I can decide to follow this and go through and do what I'm reasonably good at, or I can take a half-face shot at figuring out what I'm good at. And it didn't take me that long, because I've already, by that time I was into quizzing for a long time. There was something that Siddharth Basu did called Quiz Time. I came here, we were national finalists. And I said, maybe quizzing, media, that's the kind of thing that I'm interested in. Okay? And possibly the most important thing that that girl did for me was to make me understand that if you've got to pursue a life, you might as well pursue something that you believe really strongly about, even if you don't get to the top. Because the truth is, as I said, many people come and say that, you can also become an Amir Khan. You may not become an Amir Khan, but at least you'll have more fun trying to become an Amir Khan in something you want to be, rather than doing something else which you totally don't want to be. And so 2 years later, when I asked her to marry me and she said that she's already accepted somebody who's working in the US, I was really upset about it. But the life lesson that she had given to me by that time was already, as I said, well into it. So at that point in time, I figured out that possibly media, communications, quizzing, knowledge, playing with knowledge was important. So two things you figure out. So one of them is what are you interested in? The second thing, which is very important and which we'll come to as, as educators would know far more about it, is what is your style of working? Okay. My style of working is play. I'm too lazy to do anything I don't really like. Ergo, I have to find things to do which I enjoy. And I like to juggle 2-3 things. I'd like to write an article, I'd like to do a quiz, I'd like to do something else. That's the only way I work. And similarly, you will come across children who are exactly like that. There's some kids who will say, once I get into something, this is it. I put on my blinkers and I stay. There are others who dance. I dance. And therefore, when you nurture dreams, you've also got to factor in not just interest, but temperament. Because temperament is a huge part of how you're going to deal with the kind of things that happen in your life. So these were two things that are extremely important life lessons that I came across. And the third is that, when you sort of nurture dreams, one of the big things that you've got to do is you've got to get people and, the student every once in a while, when they follow even their chosen path, and, it may be off the beaten track, sometimes it's on the beaten track. I mean, there are kids who say, Dad, I want to be an accountant. Thank goodness, because, we need good accountants, especially around 31st March. But, there are going to be kids like that. So my point is that there are other kids who are off the beaten path. What they really need from people is often not just saying, okay, son, you need to do this, or young lady, you need to do this. But it's also they need to be told, it's all right. It's not the end of the world. So in this journey, while it sounds fantastic that from there I went on to TWI and then joined ESP and then KKR, then working with the World Cup, and it was a smooth journey, it wasn't. 1.5 years into saying that, software is not there, I want to do media, I went and joined a very prominent research quiz outfit in Calcutta. And a 1.5 years later, remember, there are about 2 research quiz outfits in the country. I fell out with the owner. Now, if there are just 2 places to apply for a job in that business, what are you going to do? Because that's exactly one of the dangers of following something which is very exotic, is that there are very few other opportunities. So I remember going back to my father and saying that, is it a good idea, Dad, I followed my dreams and passions, should I sort of put down my tail and sort of go back and say, computer science, it's 1.5 years, okay, I'll lose some seniority, but, this is the right thing to do. And he said that if you've spent, when I had first told my father that I wanted to do something else rather than computer science. He had said, after you graduate, do computer science for 1 year so that you know that you're not running away from it. So whatever happens after that, after a year, you quit. But for that 1 year, you do it. So my father, when I quit, I'd quit after 1 year of working. So when I went back to my father after 1.5 subsequent years, first thing the only thing he said, do whatever you want to. But if you've spent 1 year doing a job and thought this isn't the job career choice for you, and you're going to go back to it, I mean, what are you going to think after 1 more year? Do you want to think that through before you do that? And I thought back on what I thought about that year, and I realized that I didn't want to go back, and there were other things other than just quizzing in the media, and then I went back. So what you often need when you're trying to nurture those dreams is sometimes just to remind people about their courage, remind people about the choices they had made before, because there are moments of weakness, there are moments that they just need to be told, A, it's okay to fail, because you have to fail and you're going to fail, and it's okay to fail every once in a while, and B, that if you have thought this through with so much time, persist. Just stay the course one little bit more. So these are the only real things that as I said, I can bring to this table as an experience. And I'd just like to finish by saying that I work with the FIFA Under-17 World Cup, and we have an Indian team that's going to be playing for the first time a FIFA tournament. And I see the children out there, and one of the big things about why they are able to pursue their dreams, most of them are from the Northeast, most of them are from much more lower middle class communities. One of the reasons, and I've seen kids in Gurgaon, I've seen kids in Bombay, often they're equally good. The point that they have, the advantage that those children have is there is no dichotomy in their minds. They are not caught up with this thing, should I go in for education, should I go in for that? Because really education for them is unfortunately not as low-hanging a fruit as it is for us. They know that even if I finish their 10th or their 12th, they're going to get some government job as a clerk. If they can get this thing going and they can actually play football well, they have a real opportunity. Even if they make money for 10 years, they can be a coach afterwards. They have a real opportunity for success. So in many ways, our kids, especially children in the city who come up from more privileged households, when they want to go into sport, they have this interesting situation where just the things that they are likely to lose are far, far stronger, and which is why you have it in a particular way. And that is something that's true of almost anything that we're going to do, that if you have choices, how does Citibank retain people to be bankers? Because face it, banking is a really boring job. Any bankers, it is a really boring job. I have friends who do it. How do you retain people? You give them golden handcuffs. You just pay them so much money that they can't do anything else. And so similarly, kids from privileged households in many ways have golden handcuffs. They're stuck to a situation where they do not know that, I really want to be a footballer, but I cannot even take that choice as a footballer because I'd be giving away doing this or doing that or going to Wharton or doing whatever. And these are the kind of choices that I think our job as elders is to just try and hold their hands, nurture them, tell them nothing is the end of the world, and whether you succeed or you fail, try and do something you enjoy because you're going to spend a hell of a lot of time doing it. Thank you.
Joy, really a very wonderful presentation, and a very, that passion, how you nurture and also created your own life that is really very much visible, and it was so nice and inspiring for us. And one thing which you said is very, very remarkable, that when there is no dichotomy in the mind, and when the opportunity cost is not that high, so there is so much clarity in mind, and not only just loving what you do, but also to do what you love. So thank you so much. So now I'd like to invite Maria to please share her thoughts.
I can stay sitting. Come to the mic.
Okay, sure.
Good evening, everyone. Very interesting thoughts that we have just heard, and it's interesting to see the insights from an experiential point of view. I was planning to actually start with a statement which I think can summarize what you have just said. It's the idea that when you do a job you like, you will never have to work in your whole life. That's a statement we hear all the time. Unfortunately, as career counselors or guidance specialists, we see a large amount of students who come for us and who seek for help for higher studies. It's a very key moment when you actually need to make a big decision. So from a professional standpoint, we would classically say that our overall purpose would be to, on one hand, find out what is the area of interest of the person, what direction that specific individual wants to go. In some sense, what could actually elicit a stable and durable interest. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is also trying to figure out how high that person can go academically, because it's always a balance. There is the sense of interest, but there is also ability. Both those two aspects need to be taken into account when you do career counseling. The difficulty is that usually during that process, families, schools, and even society in general pays way more importance to the second one with regard to the first. For example, at school level, how many teachers, knowing that a high school student could actually crack an IIT exam, would still support him or encourage him to enter into literature or sociology, even if it's of his interest. It's at some point there needs to be also a reality check. And obviously with the high level of competition at the level of higher studies, ability tends to be way overpowering with regard to interest. The difficulty there, and why I would like to pay your attention to the aspect of interest, and why we believe as counselors that it's an area which is important, is because, as it has been mentioned previously, interest is the base of motivation. Interest is actually has the strongest predictor with regard to motivation, and as we'll see also later, satisfaction. In turns, many studies in psychology have actually shown that motivation is a strong component of our achievements. One of the studies I wanted to share with you so that I add my part of more scientific information to it and more practical research-based information is there was a study conducted in Lille by Professor Forner. He took students who were passing an equivalent of 10 standard exam. And in the beginning of the year, he assessed their abilities, meaning their level of intelligence, grossly said, and their level of motivation. And at the end of the year, when they passed their 10 standard, the fields are mathematics and history, basically. He actually saw which of those two were mostly predictive of success. And the surprising result was that both actually were. Meaning that the highest achievers at a standard test were those who had both highest motivation and highest ability. One does not compensate for the other. Both are really needed to go along to reach a real high potential in a given field. The difficulty is that when we think of motivation, we sometimes forget to look deeper inside. From, let's say, more psychological aspect, we can say that motivation can be seen as two parts. We would have the extrinsic motivation and the intrinsic motivation. The intrinsic one being that sense of personal drive, the interest that would prompt us to get involved and to spend time in one given activity. The extrinsic one would be that motivation which comes from external rewards. So let's say at educational level, we can say that an intrinsically motivated student would be a student who would want to study a subject because of his deep interest for that subject. Whereas an extrinsically motivated student would be one who actually involves himself and studies it because, first of all, he's attracted by the positive feedback, meaning the grades, the congratulations, the appreciations he would get, or by his fear of negative reward, punishments, family expectations, pressure. So both those are motivations. The difficulty is that we usually, at a society level, at a school level, tend to overemphasize on the extrinsic motivation. We believe that motivating a student is increasing his motivation by giving him some sense of reward or some sense of accomplishment, more than working on discovering or developing his personal intrinsic motivation. And why I do believe in some sense it's an important part is because at the same time, further in life, the one motivation which is mostly associated with a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in life, it comes from doing something for which we are intrinsically motivated. So in some way, my question would be, how can we, in applied setting of a school, try to nurture this sense of intrinsic motivation? Is it through designing the course? Is it through a larger set of options? Is it through letting more possibilities and less early orientations? Like, for example, in France, there were many actions that were taken after those studies aiming towards putting later and later the specializations at high school level, for example, in order to let the students discover more fields and experience more different areas before actually making a choice of career direction. So my small addition, which is from a more research background, would be how can we at educational level, even at a class level, nurture more the intrinsic motivation of the students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think when you talk about the intrinsic motivation, it is a very, very important point. But many times the intrinsic motivation is also being governed by a student's own conditioning, and also being conditioned by the kind of family he or she is coming. Like you look at the people coming from UP and Bihar, right from the beginning it is being told that, okay, if you want to become somebody great, you become a civil servant, an IAS, an IPS, that kind of a thing. Though it is changing now very fast. So what is really good enough and what is really aspiration in one setting, that is very much different for the other setting as well. So we also need to really coach and mentor our students to tell what exactly they are capable of becoming.
It's also in the sense of,
Yeah.
I think it's important to give a sense of reality as per their ability.
Yeah.
That's a difficulty I've faced in concept of counseling in India, is that basically when parents with their child comes, their main question is what kind of IAS officer he should be trying to be.
Exactly, yeah.
So
in that way, suppose the child is not really made for that. You see that, and also the challenge we face is more about the broad-based education, that everybody should know this of this and this of the, like this kind of thing. Like having a broad set of certain knowledge and not really being an expert in one field. So somebody was saying that and a squirrel is meant to, climb a tree. But, if say that, okay, not only climbing a tree, you should swim also, then she will always think I'm a failure. So I think we need to understand. And also a fish, her ability to swim rather than, climbing a tree. So we need to understand that what is the seed of possibility a child is having. So thank you very much, Maria. So now we'll request Mr. For the presentation. Thank you.
But I want to say thank you for giving me another chance after having taken a lot of time in the morning. So how much time do I have? 10 minutes, okay. So could I request you to knock me on my head or knock on something? Sure. At 2 minutes. Yeah? Right, so thanks, Joy, for being so open about the way your career played out, and Maria for trying to bring this into a theoretical frame. What I would like to do is to share with you something that we have developed for India, which is a blend of experience, a blend of research, and ideas that could work in this country, that could work actually in a context like this. Because the moment you start talking of career guidance, you could have somebody like Dev Lahiri, who introduced it, saying now, after 25 years, that career guidance is worthless. Right? And he has a real point over there, because the way career guidance is being delivered into this country is psychometric based. It limits, it puts people into boxes. Yeah? So when we bring the question of dream and the realization of dream, and then look at career as an aspect of our dreams are not, our careers and dreams need not be one and the same. Yeah? The work that we do could be a part of the bigger dream that we have. So Jiva is a career guidance methodology that we have developed for India, which we have rolled out across the country, and we train people in this method. Now the name Jiva should tell you our approach to guidance. And what we are saying here is a successful career is usually deeply entwined with one's life. And if you listen to what Joy was saying, he went all over the place, right? From computer science. I wouldn't have ever believed it, Joy, that you would ever make it. It's worse than banking. But you see, and then Maria was trying to point to us the research thread that runs, the scientific thread that runs, even through a life like Joy's life, where there are clearly definable psychological factors that you could bring into play to liberate the child, not to put the child into boxes, to connect the child to life. So the idea I'm presenting to you here is a very small slice from the Jiva methodology for guidance. Yeah? Dreams, we're talking about dreams, right? So there is this lovely rhinoceros, and he's been told, or she's been told, never give up on your dreams. And she's working out really hard, really hard. Intrinsic motivation and extrinsic, and all this stuff is going on over there. But what is her dream? Now, what do we do? Those of us who are working with young people, do we kill that dream? And we say, are you off your head? Unicorns don't even exist. Can we do that? Should we do that? Is that morally right? Or on the other hand, should we say that, yeah, become a unicorn, become a tamarind tree, become a mango tree or whatever? Yeah? There is a method over here, and that's what I'm trying to highlight to you. We look at career guidance and the realization of dreams in 4 parts. Self, the world of work, alternatives, career alternatives, and preparing a young person to achieve these alternatives. Yeah? I'm just spending time with you in the next couple of minutes on the self part of it, understanding myself. Yeah? 3 aspects. I mean, there are multiple things that psychologists have said to us. I'm a psychologist myself, and I'm tired of, personality, motivation. The list is endless. And at the end of it, you have a report which is bigger than the textbook, which no one else understands other than yourself as the psychologist. Yeah? I've reduced it down to 3 main things. That's all you need to do self-understanding. Interests, aptitudes, and career beliefs. Yeah? And you will see between what Joy expressed and what Maria has presented to us, that most of what they said fit in over here. Yeah? Understanding my interests, understanding my aptitudes, and understanding my values, my deeper motivations. That's what I mean when I say career beliefs. I'm going to be looking just at the interest and aptitude part. Yeah? Now, when we use this word interest as a very important part of career guidance, but what is it? Can somebody give me quickly 1 or 2 words that define interest? What is the meaning of the word interest? Something which you love, yes. Passion, inclination, yeah. Inclination is on the border. I'll put inclination on the side, and we'll come back to this. Yeah. Now, if you have an example here, and that's why I thanked Joy in the beginning itself, because he's our illustration. There's passion in what he does, yeah, quizzing. There isn't passion in something else in his life. Yeah. There was an undergirding passion which had nothing to do with career, but to this woman who left him, and therefore something else happened with regard to the playing out of his life. See? So what is an interest then? Patterns of likes and dislikes. The pattern, it's not just what I love, but what I love, is there a pattern in it? I love children, I love healing them. I love this type of environment. So the pattern in my likes. It's not just the ability to say, I love plants, and I love animals, and I love this. But a good psychologist would be able to pick that pattern out, pattern of likes. Activities that draw your attention, activities that evoke curiosity, things that you want to pursue further, right? Oops, yeah. So that's interest, things that turn us on, things that give us a buzz. Yeah? Look at this picture. Yeah? You can't help but laugh. Yeah? Is this young man interested in joining the army? He's dead keen on it, isn't it? He desperately wants to join. And the officer is measuring him. The world measures us, my friends. And I say this often to educators where, we mollycoddle our children, wrap them up in cotton wool, and we say, life, wait for it to happen. But you are going to be measured the moment you step out of that lovely school. Now, he loves it. Do you think he's going to make it? Pretty remote. They're going to spit him out. Yeah? Then what happens to his dreams? Then what happens to his passions? When the love of his life left him, joy, what happened to his dreams? Something happened. Something cracks inside, isn't it? It hurts. Therefore, what Maria was talking about, the word aptitude. Now, in contemporary psychology, this is a bad word. You're not supposed to say, I have a capacity for. You're not supposed to say, I can measure it with an aptitude test. It's politically off, and it's incorrect to say it. But the fact is that you do. The fact is that you are good at certain things, and you're not so good at certain. So what is an aptitude then? Your capabilities and talents, what one you're naturally good at. Now, this is a theoretical, philosophic position that you need to take. Is there something as a natural inclination? Some would say there isn't. Yeah? I would say there is. Capacity for performance. Yeah? Innate. Is there something within us which is innate, inborn, which a good counseling program can bring and discover? Yeah? An activity in which you find it easy to excel, better chances of success. So you have interest on the one hand and aptitude on the other hand, right? The question that comes then is, which is more important for career guidance? The interest part or the aptitude part? What would you say? You've heard a life experience and you've heard very sound theory. So now, both? Are you sure? Why both? Because, let's say the green line represents a person's interests and the yellow one represents aptitudes. Both are important because you could have an interest for which your talent is low. Where do interests come from? Interests don't come from within. You're not born with an interest. That is the way inclination, that word begins to come in. Yeah? Your interests come to you from around you. You meet a marathon runner and you fall in love with that. You meet a quizzer and you want to be that. And you are where? 15, 16, 17, that impressionable stage in your life, what we spoke about earlier in the morning. Interests can change. Interests need not reflect aptitude. And on the other side, here, I mean, it's really fortuitous that Joy is here because all my examples are coming out of him. I'll buy you a drink in the evening, Joy, so for sure, yeah. Now, if you go back to him, yeah, he was good at computer science. I'm sure if his father was a different kind of father, he would have cracked the whip and he would have said, you go out there and earn and have a respectable job and be worthy of me. All that he could have said. But here is an example of a person who had an aptitude but without an interest for it. That is us. And this is a dynamic, changing picture. Yeah? It's not written in stone forever and ever. So what is it that good career guidance will look for? How can one help a young person realize her dreams? That star in the middle. What's that star represent? The blend of interest and aptitude. I love it, and when I do it, it comes to me easier than other things. Yeah? So that's what I refer to in the Jiva model. I refer to this as potential. Yeah? Now, potential doesn't, just because you've discovered it, it doesn't mean that it's going to blossom. There are a whole lot of things that can influence it. Yeah? Influence of significant others, socioeconomic status, prestige, the prestige of an occupation. Yeah? Influence of gender, influence of, the labor market versus education, that tension. They're all things that can influence the manifestation of a potential. Just because you have it, it doesn't mean it's going to blossom. And this is where all of us come into play. A little more time, sir? 1 minute. Ooh, okay. So then, let's just look at occupational prestige and see what it is. Yeah. Now, middle class predicament. Yeah. A child may have a potential for something which his class doesn't allow him to pursue. A child may have a potential for something which his class may not allow him to pursue. Irrespective of ability, there's lots of research to show us, irrespective of ability, social class, irrespective of ability, higher social class students have higher aspirations by default. The son of an architect will not aspire to become a bricklayer. The example that was given to us earlier on, although I disagree that the bricklayer is lower than the architect. That's a social construction. Yeah? We can build houses without an architect, so therefore the bricklayer is more important. Yeah? We could go on with that argument, but the point I'm making over here is knowing a child's potential is not enough. There are these factors. The middle classes are simultaneously confronted by the threat of slipping back to lower levels of social standing, and the real possibility of rising up is only through the pathway of the career of their child. Yeah, the middle class is in the middle, right? If the children are not going to make it, the family is going to drop. The family is going to be able to stay where they are only if the child gets into the IITs or gets into the proper kind of education and becomes an architect or whatever it is. Yeah. We could go on. I'll skip over all this. Over here, yeah? This is, now we are here, all of us here, this is related to prestige, the question of prestige. An important phrase that's been left out in the organization of this seminar and in our conceptualization as university people. Yeah, we have higher education, we're all experts in this. But what about further education? They're different. Yeah, and what do I mean by the higher and further education? Higher education is university education, it's academic education, it's degree loaded, right? When I say further education, what I mean is vocational education. The bricklayer is a vital part of the construction industry. And as I said, there is evidence to show us that the number of bricklayers needed are far more than the number of architects that we need. Yeah? So vocational education leads us towards skills and towards the trades. It's practical, it leads you to a certificate and to a diploma. We know this. But what happens? Occupations receiving the lowest prestige ratings are those that belong to the blue collar, the further education side, and to the vocational category. Yeah? So, and look at it's happened today. I didn't hear one word about the vocational side. And here, the government of India forbade, it was unfortunate, the previous fracas that happened about the government and what. But then, if you set things aside, good things have happened in India. Good things have happened in India in the last 60 years. It's terrible where we are today, but we should also look at the positive. One of the good things that has happened with this government is that we brought a focus onto skills. So Skill India is big. It's worth a lot of money. Why aren't the universities, for example, tying up and implementing skills-based courses? There's very little demand, I'm telling you, for your graduates. Very little. They'll struggle to find a job. They'll have to go to England to look for a job. There's a great amount of need. There's a great amount of requirement for the other side. And when you look at the young person, not all of them need to be university bound. Not all of them need to be university bound. Yet, that's all that we offer to them. Despite the fact that over the last 5 years, this country has a big program. There is something called the National Career Service. There is something called the NSDC, the National Skills Development Corporation. Fantastic stuff, I'm telling you. I'm the biggest critic of the Indian educational system, but when you look at the vocational side, we are on the right track. Yeah. I worked with the NSDC through the ILO to produce those curriculum and to produce that structure. But the universities are not picking it up, and still prestige affects very badly. Yeah. I'll go to my last slide now, and since we're running out of time and I don't want to hold you up too much. Now, if we're talking about dreams. Yeah? How do we make these dreams come true? Opportunities to acquire skills for career preparation are not easily available to most young people, irrespective of school type and socioeconomic status or gender. Yeah? Because career guidance has become testing. Career guidance has become putting people into boxes and telling them this ought to be your dream, engineer or doctor. Supposing it's a child who's much more practically oriented and he's going to be a brilliant brickmaker, and he does it properly, through the system, goes through the polytechnic system, etc. I'm telling you, in 5 years, he'll be earning much more than a surgeon. If you stand out there and whistle, you can get a surgeon. There are so many of them. But look for a brickmaker, look for a plumber, look for a carpenter. Impossible to find. Yeah? So the question of helping young people make choices and building that up in the schools. Significant others in the family are the ones who are the career counselors, not the career counselor anymore. Yeah? Coming to the very end. Yeah? I'm using this slide now to draw both my lectures to an end. What is development? We are here broadly within the framework of development. What is development? Is it a ladder to the stars, where we're getting our young people to go higher and higher and higher, and the higher they go, the more they are respected? This is a linear teleology. Yes, a very Aristotelian, starting with them and going on into the Western philosophers, the belief that there is an end, the belief that you can go higher, and the belief that there is a top of a mountain. This is a Western epistemology. The belief that, Jesus is coming again. This is a Western epistemology. Whereas, what is the truth? Development is not like this. Every one of us, and the story that we heard just now, development looks like this. Development on the ground is a spiral. There is no beginning, there is no end to it. And this is the Eastern epistemology, the Eastern teleology, if you want to look at it like that. Whichever it is, the non-Judeo-Christian traditions, when you look at it, the Buddhist tradition or the Hindu tradition or the Tibetan, look at it, they would say that life goes on and on and on, and the pressure to get ahead is not there in this picture. Isn't it? So what am I trying to say at the end? Career development is a continuous elaboration and construction characterized by adaptation, discovery, and renewal. Yes, and we heard this lovely story, which is this, isn't it? It may not necessarily always point forward and up. The world of work may require new learnings, learning to face new challenges. It may require the individual to return and start again. Return and start again. If you look at your lives carefully, that's the way your lives have played out. Yeah? So to conclude, prosperity does not come from being the best. There is no such thing as the best. There is no such thing as the mountaintop, because the moment you reach the mountaintop, there's another mountaintop. There is no such thing as the top. Prosperity does not come from being the best. Prosperity comes from doing one's best. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Gideon, it was really a very insightful presentation, and also your model of the Western and the Eastern, the whole spiral. It was really very, very engaging. And I just have one small question on this thing. See, which was also coming very clearly from the Joy's presentation, that is not about working hard, but the working where your heart is and what you do. And another thing is, not like work hard, but, play hard to make really a distinction in life. Another thing is, there are some people, you should not stop, go for this direction to that destination, and success is never a destination, and so on. And somebody said, one small couplet, कि तू शाहीन है, परवाज़ है काम तेरा. I'll just explain in English. तेरे सामने आसमां अभी और भी हैं. That means you are an eagle, your word is to fly, and you keep flying to the new and new skies. There are still some new skies left. So always keep running, and one day you die. And there are these shamsans and all these are full of those people who thought that they are somebody like big shot in life. So one is that view of life. Second is that you are happy and fulfilled right now. Rather than chasing, because success is also a very relative term. So the Eastern philosophy says, the aap deepo bhav, and also you say that you stop and you reach, you win the race. So on this, what would be your comments?
I've lost track of the question of what you're trying to. If you can just ask me the question, that will be helpful. Or do
Yeah.
one of the two.
So what I want to say that is still you say that doing the best, but you sometimes the person who is saying that I want to do this or that is also being so much conditioned by the society. So sometimes also you're thinking about this goal and that goal. So energy is not focused in now. So another way says that okay, you just be whatever you're doing, and your role will be given to you. So this where I want your comments.
Now, I've seen Joy prepare for his quizzes. He worked like hell. He worked very hard. You see, so the point over here is not the distinction between playing and working. What is meant, I think I'm sure what you meant is, are you doing something that you can do well and that you love? Yes, that's the, if you are doing that, then you're playing, or then you're at work. So having clarified that first point, the last slide which you're referring to, we are in a strange situation in this country where you have the overwhelming pressure on this country post-globalization is to follow Western ways of life, and particularly with regard to career. And now, and therefore, what is there in the mind of the parent? Going to university is a good thing. They believe that getting a degree is a good thing. Getting a diploma, on the other hand, is lower. This is the belief. What our work needs to focus on is to get into those belief structures, is to be able to, and as I was saying to somebody during the lunch time with Anamika, our client is not just the person. Our client is the family. Yeah, so what Dave was saying in the morning, I would fully endorse that we need to have parent-teacher meetings, even at the university level, yeah? And include, see, we have to look at changes at the systemic level, not at the individual level. Yeah? So, I mean, while I could go on answering your...
let me just,
yeah.
okay, thank you. So we have Tushar with us, and I'll invite him to make his talk.
Good evening, everyone. Having listened to the narratives of my much senior panelists and realizing that they're the people who have done very good in their fields and their respective fields, I realized that what a big task I've been given here. I haven't even properly fallen in love till now in my life.
That's not difficult.
Unlike the other speakers, other distinguished panelists with me, I limit my speech to a student's perspective. I'll talk about how a transition from school to college for a student is. So my first day at Jindal Global Law School, mesmerized, dazzled, and baffled totally. Coming from a all-boys Christian Brothers school, St. Columba in the heart of Delhi, Jindal Global Law School was to be my home for the next 5 years. Is it? It's okay. College gave me a chance to be myself and to do the things that I like the most. And it is then that I've actually realized that there is no substitute for experience. However, this transition from being in the comforting walls of your school to coming into the competitive atmosphere that is the college, this transition is indeed very gritty. As I see it, at least for me, there were 3 phases to it. That is the late high school phase, where you'll have to choose your stream. Then the second phase was the college finding phase, which college you want to go to, where Mr. Gideon's interest and aptitude analysis comes in. Then there was finally the first year of college phase. Like most in all the 3 phases, I too didn't know what I was getting into or what I actually wanted to do. But as Lewis Carroll put it in Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you are going, then any road can take you there. When in school, life was carefree. I enjoyed more and I cared about my life less. I was nurtured and imbibed with lessons and values that I follow even today. I believe schools are the most important part of one's life, more than college. Many of you might disagree, but I think that school teaches you the basic values, the discipline. It lays down the foundation of this journey called life. College is like an internship where you apply the basics and learn from your mistakes. And it's only after getting through college that you're finally prepared to stand toe-to-toe with life, having been fostered properly at each stage. High school is also the time when most parents, in hope of securing a future for their children, start preparing them for competitive exams. Some fight it out with their parents, while others get tangled in the shop known as Fitji. I was lucky enough to be in the former category. Misguided and confused, I happened to take PCM with biology in my plus two on the pretext that life would be happier and safer. But it's only after my board exams that I realized that you cannot be happy doing something with what you don't like, even if it feels safer. Phase one for me was being anxious, upset, and scared. Will I even get into a college or not? Will I be able to do well in my life or not? How will I accomplish the expectations my parents yearn for me? Similar questions used to play with my head on daily basis as I inched closer to high school graduation. The vision of my parents, the vision of parents and students all through this time are likely to be different, and no matter how much one tries, conflicts are bound to arise. It is at this time that career counseling helps a student and his parents to decide the best possible avenues for him or her. Even in my own case, it was a career counselor who helped me in understanding what is right and what's not. He made me realize that even if science doesn't work for me, I could always change my path after school, and it was him who instilled in me a sense of confidence and a roadmap which was highly useful. But as life had for me in store, in my phase two, I decided that I wanted to pursue law as a career. Uh, it wasn't obviously a random choice, as my father is an advocate, and I liked what he did, but I don't know why he wanted me to be a doctor. So I joined legal coaching classes, but somehow I ended up so confused that I gave different entrances for engineering, medical, and law. To my dismay, I barely cleared any. It was a time when I was worried about my life. If it wasn't for the support of my parents, I can't imagine where would I have been. The day my parents reserved my seat in the BB LLB honors at Jindal Global Law School, I breathed a sigh of relief. If I remember properly, this was a day when I was content after a very long time. Around 2 months later, I officially embarked onto my phase three, that is college. First of all, coming from an all-boys school, I won't shy from saying that I was astonishingly keyed up to share the classroom with humans other than males. And things, at the outset, things started to fall in place for me. Wide avenues opened, life looked more beautiful, and at the same time more stable. However, I could not see the other side of this coin. Getting through the first year was indeed a very tough job. And a successful transition from school to college is only completed once you realize the importance of your first year. Enjoying the amount of freedom I never had, I made my share of mistakes, which probably most first years make. An year where I could only see the beauty of college but not its consequences if mishandled. Misjudging college to be easy, I narrowly passed my semester exams, which made me realize that things will not be spoon-fed in college. It will not be like school, where you'll have the support of your teachers till the very end, and that you'll have to work hard for the things you want. After that, there was not much looking back. Somewhere between my first year, I realized that studying law actually made me happy, and this is something I really wanted to do regardless of whether I scored good marks or not. I realized that I had made a right decision, and my transition from high school to college was complete. And listening to Mr. Gideon's interest and aptitude analysis, I now feel more confident that it was the right thing to do. With great power comes great responsibility. Since school days, I was always dazzled by student politics and wondered how it must be like being one of the democratically elected representatives of the student body of your college. It was in my third year that I made my mind that I will stand for elections, and so I finally stood for the post of Vice President of JGLS Student Council. From fighting with the administration for the smallest of things like the Wi-Fi speed, to getting a sensible Good Samaritan drug policy implemented thanks to our Student Welfare Director, Mr. Dev Lahiri, it has taught me a great deal. Stressed juniors and sometimes even seniors coming for help and guidance instilled in me a sense of responsibility and sanity. It has been my constant efforts from the day I've entered office as the Vice President that I help my peers in whatever way I can. Moreover, standing and holding office for a term of 1 year has helped me evolve as a person myself. Criticism helped me to learn in the game, and thus I could succeed. More often than not, the ones standing as dissent are neglected. We need to learn from the views of all. The student grievances are not limited on any one, and some of the best solutions can be molded from differing opinions. Election campaigning was another thing, a thing which I and my friends can never forget. The period where friends were lost and friends were made only turned me into a tougher person on a quest to help the student body through their thick and thin. I obviously enjoyed the little perks which came with this power and authority. With my term as the Vice President just about to come to an end, I look back and think to myself, due to all the work, the stress, the dire want of helping the student community, this job was not easy at all. However, it was worth every bit of it. in the end, to just conclude my speech, I'd like to say that to parents and teachers, please encourage your children to do the things which they like. Help us fly wherever we want. Support us, for if we don't fall, we will not learn. Thank you.
Tushar, it was really wonderful speech, and we all are very much touched, moved, and inspired by your talk. I think we had enough discussion on many topics, and what I would like to say that I'm sure we all have seen the video of Steve Jobs, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," and where he says, that you are living your day as if it is going to be your last day. Then what you would like to do, and what you're about to do, if there is so much of difference in the two, then you have to think that, okay, something is not right, and you need to really take certain, actions in life. So one is that to know that what is the real passion of a student, and then providing with the right kind of guidance and right kind of passionate mentors who are also very secure and self-aware. And that combination make a bigger impact in life. Whenever the students are choosing the goals and aspiration for their life, sometimes those visions are also like a tunnel vision or like a vision of a frog in a well. Because somebody who is a frog in a well, what that person will think? Oh, one day I want to become a king of this well. Nothing beyond that. But the life is limitless, life is without any boundaries in life. So sometime also not getting in that narrow way and domain that what we are coming to this far, what got you here won't take you there. So in that way, a lot of discussion and mentoring and support is needed. Even in our ancient scriptures, we have seen this, like how Bhim was trained and how Arjuna was trained. So I believe it is a more of being fulfilled here and now, both for the student as well as for a teacher. Then only the bigger things may happen in life. If the teacher remains just like a teacher but does not transform into a guru, somebody who is somebody with just mere looking at touching 100 GB of data transferred just in one go, and somebody who is removing the darkness from within. I know that we all are doing wonderful things and nurturing so many children, and it is really a great reward when you nurture somebody as a great achiever. Many, many years down the line, if you meet, you feel the highest level of satisfaction and happiness which cannot be mentioned. So any panelist would like to add something?